There's a quiet moment that comes for most people at some point in their lives. It doesn't come with an announcement, no alarm bells, no dramatic shift. It usually shows up in a simple question: am I actually ready for retirement? Not just financially, but emotionally, structurally, strategically. Because retirement isn't just about stopping work, it's about replacing everything that work used to provide: income, stability, structure, even peace of mind. And here's where most people get it wrong. They spend decades saving money, but almost no time learning how to use that money. That's why today we're going to walk through something incredibly practical, something that, if understood and applied properly, can completely change the trajectory of your retirement. We're talking about 7 essential accounts that form the backbone of a well-organized retirement life. Now, these aren't obscure or complicated accounts. In fact, you've probably heard of all of them. But knowing they exist and knowing how to use them strategically are 2 completely different things. And that difference, that's where retirement success is often decided. So here's how we're going to approach this. First, I'll walk you through all 7 accounts quickly and clearly. Then we'll move into what really matters, the common mistakes people make, the hidden opportunities most overlook, and the strategies that can help you actually maximize what you've built. Because knowledge alone doesn't move the needle. Applied knowledge does. 1. The checking account, your financial heartbeat. Let's start simple, your checking account. This is the account you probably use every single day. It's where your money flows in and where it flows out. Before retirement, this account is usually fueled by a steady paycheck. There's often a sense of predictability, a rhythm, but retirement changes that rhythm. Now, instead of income coming from one employer, it's coming from multiple sources: investments, retirement accounts, possibly Social Security, maybe even rental or side income. And all of that needs to funnel into one central place. That place is your checking account. It becomes your financial control center. But here's where things get interesting. The strategy isn't about having a checking account. It's about how you manage what sits inside it. Because one of the biggest mindset shifts in retirement is this: you're no longer accumulating, you're now distributing, and that changes everything. 2. The high yield savings account, your quiet workhorse. Now let's talk about something that seems boring, but is actually incredibly powerful: the high yield savings account. At first glance, it doesn't look like much. It's just a place to store cash. But the difference between a traditional savings account and a high yield one can be staggering. We're not talking about small percentages here. We're talking about the difference between earning almost nothing and earning something meaningful without taking on risk. Imagine this for a moment. You have $100,000 sitting in cash. In a traditional account, that might earn you something negligible, barely enough to notice. But in a high yield savings account, that same money could generate thousands per year, without additional risk, without market exposure, without complexity. And yet, despite this, many people still leave large amounts of cash sitting in low interest accounts. Why? Because it feels familiar, convenient, safe. But safety isn't just about avoiding risk. It's also about avoiding missed opportunity. Now, to be fair, high yield accounts aren't perfect. There are trade-offs: limited withdrawals, slight delays when transferring funds, interest rates that can fluctuate. But when used correctly, this account becomes a key pillar in your retirement strategy. Not for growth, but for stability. 3, the health savings account, HSA, the most underused advantage. Now we move into something that, in my opinion, is one of the most overlooked tools in retirement planning: the health savings account. And here's why it stands out. It's not just tax advantaged, it's triple tax advantaged. Think about that for a second. Most accounts give you 1 tax benefit, some give you 2. But this one, 3. You get a tax deduction when you contribute. Your money grows tax-free. And if used for qualified medical expenses, you withdraw it tax-free. That's incredibly powerful, especially when you consider one unavoidable truth about retirement: healthcare costs are not optional. They're coming whether we like it or not, and they tend to rise over time. So having a dedicated, tax-efficient way to handle those expenses, that's not just smart, that's strategic. And there's another layer here that many people don't realize. If you reach age 65 and don't use the funds for medical expenses, you can still withdraw them, just like a traditional retirement account, which gives this account flexibility that most people completely overlook. 4. Work retirement accounts, the foundation, 401k, 403b. Now we get into the heavy hitters, your employer-sponsored retirement accounts. This is where most people have the bulk of their savings. Years, sometimes decades of contributions, employer matches, market growth. It all builds here. And for many, this account represents security, but it also comes with complexity because these accounts are powerful, but they come with rules, especially when it comes time to withdraw. And this is where many people run into trouble, not because they didn't save enough, but because they didn't plan how to use what they saved. We'll come back to that shortly because this is where strategy becomes critical. 5 and 6, IRA and Roth IRA, flexibility and control. Now let's talk about IRAs, both traditional and Roth. These accounts offer something incredibly valuable, control. Unlike employer plans, these are not tied to your job. You choose where to open them. You choose how to invest. You decide how to structure them. And within these accounts lies one of the most important decisions you'll ever make in retirement planning. Pay taxes now or later. That's essentially what separates a traditional IRA from a Roth. Traditional, tax break now, pay later. Roth, pay now, tax-free later. Neither is inherently better. The key is knowing when each makes sense, and that depends on your future tax situation, which for most people is not something they've fully thought through. 7. The brokerage account, the unsung hero. Finally, we arrive at the account that doesn't get nearly enough attention, the brokerage account. This one doesn't come with flashy tax advantages, no upfront deductions, no tax-free withdrawals. But what it does offer is something just as important, flexibility. You can invest, withdraw, adjust, and adapt without the restrictions that come with retirement accounts. And in retirement, flexibility isn't a luxury, it's a necessity, because life doesn't always follow a predictable plan. And having a pool of money that you can access on your terms can make all the difference. Where most people get it wrong now, here's the truth. Most people have several, if not all, of these accounts. But having them isn't the issue. The issue is how they're used. Because retirement success doesn't come from picking the perfect investment or chasing the highest return. It comes from aligning 3 critical pieces: your investment plan, your income plan, your tax strategy, and these accounts. They're the tools that allow you to bring all 3 together. Up to this point, we've talked about the tools. Now we need to talk about how to use them. Because here's something most people don't realize until it's too late. You can do everything right while saving and still make costly mistakes when it's time to withdraw. Retirement isn't just about building wealth. It's about turning that wealth into a reliable, sustainable income stream without creating unnecessary taxes or exposing yourself to avoidable risk. So let's walk through the strategies that bring these accounts to life. Strategy 1, redefining your checking account, floor. Before retirement, your checking account is often overflowing, or at least consistently replenished. There's a steady inflow, a cushion, a sense that more money is always coming. But retirement flips that equation. Now, your checking account becomes the endpoint of your income plan, and that means you need to think differently about what sits inside it. One of the most effective shifts you can make is establishing a floor, a minimum balance that you never let the account fall below. Think of this as your buffer, your breathing room, your margin for error. Because life doesn't always follow your monthly budget perfectly. An unexpected expense, a delayed transfer, a surprise opportunity, these things happen. And when they do, the last thing you want is to feel like you're scrambling. So instead of letting your account drop close to zero each month, many retirees find peace of mind by maintaining 1 to 2 months of expenses as a baseline. That way, income flows and expenses flow out, but the core cushion remains intact. It's a simple shift, but psychologically and practically, it can make retirement feel far more stable. Strategy 2, building your safety bucket with cash. Now let's talk about something that can protect you from one of the biggest risks in retirement, being forced to sell investments at the wrong time. Markets go up, markets go down. That's not the problem. The problem is when you need to withdraw money during a downturn. That's where long-term damage can happen. And this is exactly why the concept of a cash reserve or safety bucket is so important. The idea is simple. You set aside a portion of your portfolio, often 1 to 3 years of expenses, in stable, non-volatile assets. This might include high-yield savings accounts, money market funds, short-term instruments. The purpose isn't growth, it's protection. Because when markets dip, instead of pulling money from declining investments, you draw from your safety bucket. You give your investments time to recover, you avoid locking in losses, and you maintain control. Now here's the mistake people make. They either keep too much in cash, limiting growth, or keep it in low-yield accounts, missing easy gains, or skip it entirely, exposing themselves to risk. Balance is everything here. And when done correctly, this strategy becomes one of the most powerful stabilizers in your entire retirement plan. Strategy 3, using your HSA with intention. Let's come back to the health savings account, because this is where strategy can quietly create a massive advantage. Most people use an HSA reactively. They incur a medical expense and then reimburse themselves. But there's a more strategic way to think about it. Instead of using it immediately, some retirees choose to pay for medical expenses out of pocket, allow the HSA to continue growing, and use it later, tax-free. Why does this matter? Because healthcare costs often increase as you age, and having a tax-free pool of money reserved specifically for those expenses, that's incredibly valuable. Now, there are also specific uses in retirement worth noting. For example, it can help cover certain healthcare costs before Medicare. It can be used for Medicare premiums, with some limitations. It can reduce pressure on your other accounts. The key here isn't just having an HSA, it's treating it as a long-term strategic asset, not just a short-term spending account. Strategy 4, avoiding the tax time bomb in retirement accounts. This is one of the biggest and most misunderstood issues in retirement planning, and it centers around your pre-tax accounts. Accounts like 401ks, traditional IRAs. These accounts gave you a tax break when you contributed, but eventually that bill comes due. And for many retirees, it shows up in the form of required minimum distributions, RMDs. At a certain age, you are required to start withdrawing money, not because you need it, but because the rules say you must. And those withdrawals, they're taxed as income. Now imagine this scenario. You've spent decades building a large retirement account. It's grown significantly. And now, in your 70s, you're forced to withdraw substantial amounts, pushing you into higher tax brackets. That's what many refer to as a tax bomb. Not because taxes are bad, but because they weren't planned for. Strategy 5, the power of Roth conversions. This is where things get interesting. There's a window of time in retirement that can be incredibly valuable if you recognize it. It often happens after you stop working, but before you start Social Security and before RMDs begin. During this period, your taxable income may be relatively low, and that creates an opportunity. You can take money from your pre-tax accounts, convert it into a Roth account, and pay taxes on it at a lower rate than you might later. This is known as a Roth conversion, and when done thoughtfully, it can reduce future RMDs, lower lifetime taxes, increase tax-free income later. But here's the key. This isn't about converting everything. It's about being strategic, filling up lower tax brackets intentionally, planning ahead, not reacting later. Strategy 6. The role of the brokerage account in tax control. Now we return to the brokerage account because this is where everything starts to connect. Remember earlier, we said this account offers flexibility? Here's where that flexibility becomes powerful. During retirement, especially in those early years, you may need income, but you don't want to increase your taxable income unnecessarily. So, where do you pull from? This is where the brokerage account shines, because depending on how it's structured, you may control when gains are realized, you may benefit from lower capital gains rates, you may avoid pushing yourself into higher tax brackets. In other words, this account becomes a buffer, a way to fund your lifestyle while preserving your long-term tax strategy. And this is why people who ignore the brokerage account during their working years often limit their options later. Strategy 7. Tax efficiency is not optional. At this stage, everything we've talked about leads to one central idea. It's not just about how much you have, it's about how much you get to keep. And taxes play a major role in that. This is where strategies like tax loss harvesting, asset location, withdrawal sequencing all come into play. For example, some investments are more tax efficient than others, so where you hold them matters. Tax inefficient assets may belong in tax advantaged accounts. Tax efficient investments may be better suited for brokerage accounts. These small adjustments over time can create meaningful differences, not overnight, but steadily, quietly, powerfully. So here's the big takeaway. These 7 accounts are not separate pieces. They are not isolated tools. They are part of a system. And when that system is aligned, your income becomes more predictable, your taxes become more manageable, your decisions become more confident. But when they're not aligned, things can feel uncertain, reactive, stressful. And that's not what retirement is supposed to feel like. Retirement should feel like clarity, like control, like the ability to enjoy what you've spent years building. If there's one thing to remember, it's this. Retirement success isn't about doing one thing perfectly. It's about doing many things intentionally. Understanding these accounts is the first step. Applying them thoughtfully, that's where the real transformation happens. And if you take nothing else from this, take this. Don't just ask, how much have I saved? Start asking, how will I use it wisely, efficiently, and confidently? Because that question is what ultimately shapes the life you get to live in retirement.